Well, hello class. Let's continue this chapter, which is really the introductory chapter to this course. The last video lesson perhaps had a lot of terminology and may have seemed a little bit dry. Hopefully this video lesson will not be quite as arid. Today I want to talk with you about the branches of science. So we've said that science is a process for understanding the natural world. Science can also be considered various bodies of knowledge, and that is, over the centuries, various subfields of science have been developed, such as mathematics and astronomy and physics, probably the oldest of the fields of science, but then also biology and chemistry and geology and engineering, and then some newer fields, which we'll mention in a second. So these subfields have been developed as bodies of knowledge. We oftentimes think of these in terms of different kind of textbooks or classes. These subfields were established over the centuries as scholars interested in what we now call astronomy, for example, worked together to create this body of knowledge, to write these textbooks and create journals in professional societies and institutes to define these subfields. And there are also newer subfields of science that have emerged over the past century or so: biochemistry, computer science, bioinformatics, material science, for example. And actually, there are not real clear demarcations between the subfields of science. Any demarcation is more artificial than you might think. This is like having a group of athletes and dividing them into the swimmers and the gymnasts and the basketball players and the soccer players and the footballers and the softball players and the tennis players, when in fact any individual is a very good athlete and could play various sports. This course is purposely designed to ignore or to try to minimize the traditional boundaries between the subfields of science. The notion is that if a student takes only 2 of the traditional science courses, that would be like taking 1 lesson in soccer and 1 lesson in swimming, meaning that the athlete is not exposed to a wider variety of sports. And so by analogy, we will expose you to a variety of these subfields of science. And since the world is not so neatly divided into compartments of astronomy or biology or chemistry or mathematics or physics, why should your study of science be divided into such compartments? But even though we may want to minimize the distinctions between the fields, let's talk about them a little bit, these subfields that have been established over the centuries. So let's consider physics and chemistry and biology and geology first and ask, what do these scientists study? Physicists study matter and energy and forces in motion. Physics is the most fundamental of the sciences, but can also be the most esoteric, with studies of multidimensional space and string theory and unified field theory and quarks and gravity. Physicists tend to look very disheveled and possibly quirky. You might consider the lead characters of The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon and Leonard, as being physicists, although my physicist friends may object. Bazinga! Chemists study molecules and their behavior, often trying to prepare new substances that will have important properties, or trying to develop new methods of detecting and characterizing molecules. Chemistry is oftentimes called the central science because it is closely related to most other fields. Chemists tend to be more pragmatic and oftentimes have close ties with industry and may be working on patents. Biologists study life, from cells and organisms to ecosystems. They oftentimes work in medical centers or in health-related fields. You often see them wearing tennis shoes and jeans. And they are also the group of scientists most likely to have a microscope in their office or images of fish or animals or green things in their office. Geologists study the Earth and its dynamic processes, which can range from outdoor research to geochemistry in laboratories. They are the scientists most likely to wear sturdy boots, drive big trucks with big tires, and have lots of vials containing rocks in their office. And now the fields of engineering, computer science, mathematics. Engineering is a very broad field. It includes chemical engineering, civil engineering, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and other engineering areas. Engineers are a practical lot. Engineers are problem solvers and builders. They are the individuals most likely to be wearing a pocket protector, carrying various electronic devices, and still knowing how to write computer programs in Fortran. Computer scientists are the most likely to have joysticks or robots in their office and large flat screen TVs. And mathematicians are the most likely to be those who solve problems on the back of an envelope or on a whiteboard. Where do scientists work? In the United States, STEM research, STEM being an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. STEM research may be conducted at university laboratories, federal laboratories, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, that's called DARPA, Los Alamos National Laboratory, Argonne National Laboratory, Oak Ridge National Laboratories, or the National Institutes for Health. Or science may be done in private industrial labs. Among those might be Dow Chemical or Monsanto or General Electric or Bell Labs or Apple, Hewlett-Packard, Intel. Or scientists can work in private foundation laboratories such as the Mayo Institute, the Salk Institute, or perhaps even in an inventor's garage or basement. Most research that is done in a university laboratory or in federal laboratories is funded by the federal or state governments. That is our taxpayer dollars. There has been a long-standing relationship between universities, that is the faculty and students working at universities, and the federal government in conducting research. This partnership dates back to the days of Sputnik, when the Soviet Union launched a orbiting satellite before the United States, and the federal government then decided to step up its research funding and to engage faculty and students in universities in conducting this research, funding in the form of grants to universities. This then tapped the very fertile minds of faculty and students and has led to a great diversity in the type of science being studied. The research being done at universities might seem a little unusual or quirky at times, but very often this university research has provided a wealth of results that have had a greater impact than originally imagined. I'll give you a few examples. Scientists at the University of Illinois trying to develop a way to simply transfer computer files from one computer to another, develop the fundamentals for the internet. Scientists trying to use a method called electrophoresis to separate fragments of DNA developed the foundation for DNA sequencing. Scientists studying chemicals that could inhibit growth of an odd type of virus called a retrovirus had inadvertently characterized the first important drug treatment against AIDS, a drug called AZT. Science done in federal laboratories usually focuses on particular governmental needs, especially military and defense needs or national health needs. Science done in private industries usually focuses on developing a product, an electronic product or a gizmo or a drug that can be patented and commercialized. Then there is the question, what makes a scientist tick? That is, what motivates someone to go into science? Now, let me begin with a disclaimer. The purpose of this course is not to try to recruit all of you to become scientists. Okay? Rest assured. But still, I think it's worth discussing what makes a scientist tick. Why do certain people want to go into science? What motivates them? And to try to address that, we will set up in another video a panel of faculty who will talk about what motivated them to go into science, to become a scientist, and to become an educator, and maybe what are some of the frontier areas in their various fields. So we will pause now again and have a brief quiz before we continue on to our next chapter.